The M1 Garand is the long-awaited iconic semi-auto for the assault class, and today it is finally here. For those who just want a quick rundown, the M1 Garand offers some of the best semi-auto and by extension weapon performance available to any class in Battlefield 5. It performs excellently at medium range, but is also capable of succeeding really at any distance other than extreme close quarters and extreme long range. It isn't just extremely effective, however. Thanks to low recoil, it's also extraordinarily easy to use for any assault player who has at least some decent aim, and as such offers them one of the most flexible weapons in Battlefield 5. For those who want a little more detail then, in today's weapon review, we're going to be talking about the stats of the M1 Garand as we know them so far, the specializations available and that I would recommend, how it compares to the competition, and how to get the most out of it when using it on the battlefield. Starting off with these stats, as per usual of course. These aren't officially known, but are simply taken either from in-game experiences or of course the in-game menu, which does provide some information. As far as I've been able to ascertain so far, the maximum damage of the M1 Garand sits at 40, while the minimum damage sits at 30, giving it of course a 3-shot kill in close quarters and 4-shot kill at longer ranges. That drop off, however, seems to be comparatively quick when looking at other weapons such as the MAS 44 or Turner SMLE, which come with similar damage models and similar damage output. The fire rate of the weapon sits at 360 rounds per minute and is thus relatively high, but the magazine size isn't exactly generous, with only 8 shots available, and while the reload is relatively quick, and thanks to the fact that it seems to always just require 1 strip per clip, no matter how many bullets you really have left, is also relatively consistent. But because of the magazine size being what it is, likely you're going to spend quite a bit of time reloading this weapon, and it could very much be that that gets in the way of you taking out your next target and you may have to switch over to your sidearm. In terms of recoil stats, those are of course yet to be fully determined, but it does seem to be a tad lower than some of the competition out there, and thus is very much controllable. And horizontal recoil, of course, typical for these semi-autos, is expected to be 0. The spread values, as they are per usual on all of the weapons in this class, are 0.1 degrees of minimum spread while aiming down sight and standing still, 0.3 for doing the same but strafing simultaneously, and 4.5 for hip firing and moving at the same time. In terms of your specialization options available, in terms of your first choice, it's between quick aim for 33% faster ADS times or barrel bedding for an improvement to the accuracy of the weapon while stationary. Then if you go down the left hand side, you're getting an improvement to the accuracy of the weapon while you're moving, followed by light and stock, which gives you a 60% boost to movement while aiming down sight. On the right hand side, on the other hand, you have quick reload, decreasing the reload time of the weapon by 15%, followed by the enhanced grip, which gives you an improvement to the hipfire accuracy of the weapon. Then lastly, in one of the more interesting specialization choices we have for primary weapons, you can either go for the grenade launcher, giving you of course, well, essentially a grenade launcher to take out enemies with, or the heavy load, which increases the long-range damage of your bullets at the expense of a decrease to your fire rate. Specifically what this means is you will be doing a, I believe, all-range 3-shot kill, similar to the Gewehr 43, but your fire rate will be reduced to 300 rounds per minute, again, very much similar to what you would expect from the Gewehr 43. In terms of my recommendations, it very much depends if you wish to create essentially a version of the Gewehr 43 or a version of the Turner SMLE or MAS 44, because the weapon becomes very similar to those competing semi-autos depending on how you equip it with specializations. If you're going for a slightly more aggressive build but still actively use ADS, which is my personal preference, I will go for quick aim followed by quick reload and enhanced grip for a bit of emergency hip fire, and of course for the lulls at the end, the grenade launcher. If you're looking for a more long-medium range version of the M1 Garand and you're looking for something with a little bit more stopping power, more to the likes of the Gewehr 43, likely you may even want to go for barrel bedding, or alternatively also again quick aim, but then followed by custom stock and lightened stock, the left hand side upgrade tree, and of course the heavy load, to make the weapon not only as accurate as it possibly can be, but also give you that extra damage that you're looking for. In terms of comparative performance, this is, in many ways, as I previously mentioned, squarely competition for the Turner SMLE, the MAS 44 and the Gewehr 43, some of the best weapons available in Battlefield 5. For me personally, I very much see the M1 Garand as a more aggressive semi-auto and thus more comparable to the Turner SMLE MAS 44. In many ways also because of its limited magazine size, which leads me to believe that it's closer to what we had in terms of say the Selbstlader 1906 or autoloading 835 back in Battlefield 1 days, in that you were to take on one, maybe two targets in this specific instance and then quickly reload, with your reload time being relatively predictable and the weapon being extraordinarily easy to control thanks to low recoil. The only thing that's getting in your way of absolutely dominating your enemy is making sure you have good positioning, making sure you manage your mags properly and thus don't bite off more than you can chew, taking on more targets at a time than your weapon can really handle, and lastly just simply being an accurate player, because recoil isn't going to get in the way of you hitting your shots. It's your personal aiming proficiency that's going to be the problem. So the question quickly arises, is it better than the Turner SMLE or MAS? And to be honest, to fully determine that, we need the full stats, which at this point in time we don't have. But in many ways, I would answer that question with no. It's just set up slightly different, does certain things better than those weapons, such as the lower recoil, but has different problems, such as the lesser medium long range damage model, which seems to be the case when compared to those weapons, as in my personal play experience, the M1 Garand seemed to drop off to a 4-shot kill and to its minimum damage of 30 a little bit sooner than say the MAS 44 would. Also, the reduced mag size somewhat compensates for the fact that you have a lower recoil. And another point to consider is the specialization options, because, well, grenade launchers and semi-autos is a new combination for Battlefield 5, in that the only weapon before this to have a grenade launcher as equipable specialization was of course the M28 Contrambacino, a bolt-action carbine for the medic, not exactly comparable to something like the M1 Garand. For orientation's sake, I thought at this point we'd also add in, this weapon essentially hits very similar to the Turner SMLE and MAS 44 in terms of damage output, but if you're not familiar with the semi-autos, as I expect a number of you guys will be, essentially it's got STG damage output in raw terms, but in many ways is going to down targets faster thanks to the, well, higher effect of having a headshot on a target, and more importantly, the fact that if you've got decent aim, the lack of horizontal recoil is going to mean you're going to be hitting more of your shots on targets, in effect getting a faster time to kill in reality. Having covered the comparative performance, the associated playstyle likely won't be a surprise for most of you guys out there, but what should be mentioned is, for those familiar with an autoloading 835 marksman style of play from Battlefield 1, this is as currently close as you get in Battlefield 5. Limited mag, high fire rate, easy to use weapon with low recoil, entirely reliant on good positioning and more importantly, good accuracy. Saying that though, it isn't quite as restrictive as those weapons were back in Battlefield 1 days. You can take on 2 targets if you've got a decent amount of accuracy, especially in close encounter situations where you only need 3 and not your 4 shots, and thus can waste the occasional shot between targets without having to switch to your secondary weapon to actually take them out. In addition, what I'd like to mention is, while the semi-autos can absolutely be used extraordinarily aggressive directly against targets, that is, running in with the medics and hip-firing down enemies, I think your best bet with these weapons is sticking to medium range, and even better yet, flanking and coming in from the sides, taking enemies by surprise. That's when these weapons are absolutely devastating because of how quickly they can take out enemies and how it takes a while for their fellow soldiers to realize where exactly they're getting shot from. There isn't 100 bullets whizzing past them, simply 3 or 4 quick taps, and then suddenly one of their friendly soldiers is gone. So the M1 Garand overall is an extraordinarily effective weapon, and most definitely one of my new favorites. I'm going to play this thing essentially until I have it fully mastered, which shouldn't be a surprise for anybody who's followed this channel at any length, given my love for these semi-autos in, well, Battlefield 1 and also Battlefield 5. But that pretty much wraps it up for the M1 Garand. Feel free to share your own experiences with the weapon down below. If you enjoyed the video, rating would be much appreciated. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.